training, I am a mathematician. But I feel that from my childhood, I got hooked on to drawing and then getting into narratives which had pictures in them. My interest was sparked by my father, who used to read foreign graphic novels. Though I won't call them graphic novels, I would rather prefer the word comics, because graphic novels by themselves is a very difficult term to explain to a lot of people. Sequential narratives would be nice. But getting back to my father's thing, that he used to read a lot of war comics, then some British comics, and because my father was very well traveled, he was in Japan, and then I saw some Japanese comics which came back with him. Couldn't read Japanese that much, but I mean, those pictures and sensibilities of those graphic novels, which I later learned were Garo comics, and they were alternative to the mainstream manga, and it's really appealed to me, and that hooked me on. I'm a visual person, I believe, because I believe words ride on image buses. From my childhood, I was also introduced into, like all Bengali boys,
Yes.
to go and learn how to paint.
Yes.
So that's also added to. I may be wrong. Comics is born out of a need to express, when people wanted to express themselves in form of pictures and words. There are two things in place. One is, there is a sense of protest that is embedded in comics.
Okay.
Because if you look at some of the early works of comics, I mean, without getting into those details, like for example, Rake's Progress in which is considered to be comics in big paintings, which happened in England. If you ignore them and get into closer to 19th century, the comics is some kind of a protest. If you look at the Yellow Boy of the New York World, the paper started by William Randolph Hearst, that protest thing somewhat got co-opted by the mainstream and also got debased a bit with the arrival of superhero comics. It is one thing that I like superheroes. People can like superheroes, there is no problem. But what is the politics? What politics is guiding those creation of those comics? If you ask me what kind of comic should I read, you read any comic, whether it is on web, whether it is on when you don't have any money. Comics are expensive to buy, the hard copies. Now the digital versions are little on the easier side of the pocket, but get to read as many varieties of comics to understand that which comics you actually like. You may have been only exposed to Tintin. You may have been only exposed to Asterix. You may have only been exposed to Phantom. How do you know there is someone called Daniel Close?
Yes.
You might like his work.
Yes.
How do you know there is someone called Chris Ware? You might like his work. How do you know? I don't hate this word of alternative comics. They are also comics, but I would like to add, they're little different from the mainstream. I will call them literary variety, if there is such words to be used. But even if you read broadly, any comic, there is something, but you have to discover those gems from the comic. Unfortunately, in our country and abroad, there is something called the mass market media, which is dominated by few groups who have a particular politics and particular kind of stories they want to market. Good stories are not being told. There are people, Drawn and Quarterly, Fantagraphics, they do great work, but their books are selling. Fortunately for us, we get encouraged by when these books are sold. In India, it is a very sorry state still. We are still into Amar Chitrakatha and the varieties and even the new comics that are happening. They're still on the Mahabharat trip. Long form was born out of a necessity. I used to meet people with such lovely stories to tell, and they're illustrated in such great style, but there were hardly any opening for those guys. Where would the young people, unknown people, would go and get their stories published? Then there was a fortunate meeting in 2015 between Professor Pinaki De, who was a junior of my college, but I never knew him. I knew Shorbojit for a very long time, but Shorbojit Sen is a name which is not familiar anywhere, despite doing great work. And then Shekhar I knew, but Shekhar was a kind of a distant person then. We met, so it's like four people were looking at the same dream. Because we feel that comics tell the stories for everyone. It's not for children or it's not fun. The word comic is something else, and word comics, as in comic books, that's totally different. So those stories must be published, and we decided we have to put in everything. The annual will be out very soon. We have started work on the second annual. We like to ideally make a long form anthology twice a year. Long form foundation is something that that's our long term plan, which we plan to have residencies for artists, we in collaboration with others. We've got another initiative which we had first session last year at Jadavpur University. It's called Doing Graphic Stories of Dogs. That's a festival which most likely we are talking to two institutions. Either it will be in Trivandrum or it will be in Delhi, the next edition. There are two kinds of graphic novels. If you are still sticking to the term graphic novels, are two kinds of comics everywhere in the world. There is one graphic novel, for example, if you think of Marvel or DC, do they have a politics? Yes. Is it of the prevalent politics? Yes, it is, because there is Trump in America. If you're talking about India, is there any graphic narrative movement that will have a politics? Is my question. Whatever little it's there is some graphic novels which are published by Penguin and HarperCollins, these two publishers mostly. Some of those, not all, reflect the aspirational politics of the people. Dominant politics, well, Amar Chitrakatha is there. Soon you will have one story on our Prime Minister. There are two things that go as religion, mythology and cricket. One particular strip, they've also got a book now. Crocodile in water and tiger on land. It's possibly the best ever continuing strip on political commentary. I love Manjula Padmanabhan Suki. She discontinued, she has come back. That's a strong feminist line that they've taken. Some of the so-called political strip, actually, they're not very consistent at the same. See, to have a very good movement, you need to have material to back up. When I look abroad, there is consistently better material, more experimental, trying to break away from tradition. That's happening. In India, there is one person who there are actually two, Arijit Sen and Appu Pen. I look up to them to give us something. If you're using it as an educational kind of kind of area. And I should mention few names. Amruta Patil, Vishwajyoti Ghosh, Sarnath Banerjee, Shekhar Mukherjee. Then there is Shobhojit Sen. If we are given a chance, I believe in 2-3 years we'll find a few more whose work will just floor you. Where are those comics that I see on LGBT movement or LGBTQ movement? No. Very few. And they're invisible. Where is the story on disability?
Yes.
I want to give voice to that. True. That is what that drives me. I can't sleep at night at times when I feel that, no, why? Why do you keep the other? Why the other? There's obviously Prabha Malia, Kaveri, Gopala Krishnan, and your Priya Kurian. They're all very strong people.
Yes.
They're all strong narratives. The number of women who are doing comics in India is a very positive sign for me. I hope and wish more women will join Longform and sometime they edit their own narratives collection. That's the hope. We have read too much of Chitrakatha. It's not that, let them do good business, there are mouths to feed, let them do it, but let us do something else. If you believe that you have got a great story, go and draw it out. You will think of the words later. There are other people who can polish. Be honest and tell your story. Don't try to tell stories which are not part of your world or experience. If you have the passion, fire in the belly, you can make it happen. Just stick with it. Finally, you can't survive only by drawing comics. Let it be a passion. If the passion and the fire, the belly is there, you will always find ways to create your own comics and wow people. One last line. Go, draw, write your story.